What's new, pussycat? Welcome to my channel. My name's Emma Cownley. I'm a freelance copywriter and blogger, and today I'll be taking you through what I'm still only tentatively calling the Red Flag Chronicles.
The Red Flag Chronicles.
I hadn't actually intended to make a fourth installment in this video series, but somebody reached out to me via email with a horror story. They wanted to get it off their chest, and I was like, do you know what, babe? Let's do it. So I went back onto the socials. I was like, guys, gonna be making a fourth installment. Do you have anything horrific you want to get off your chest and tell me? By gum, you did. And so we're back at it again today, going through these stories. Now, as usual, I'd like to preface this video by just saying that these videos are intended for educational purposes only. When you're a freelancer, you tend to learn by making horrible mistakes. You're so traumatized by that mistake that you learn to recognize the signs in the future and you never make that mistake again. Hopefully. It's my aim with these videos to just go over some of the more common red flags or bad client situations that my fellow freelancers have found themselves in, so that if you find yourself in that situation in future, you'll know what to look for, or you'll know how to get out of it. We're not here to slag off clients necessarily. We're not here to slag off other freelancers or take enjoyment from their downfall. What we're here to do is to have some good learnings and some shared trauma bonds, because it's the last video of the year and I really wanted to end on a high note. So that's what this is. In fact, I got sent so many stories that I've got enough for another video after this. But if you have anything that you want to share as part of the Red Flag Chronicles video series, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn and send me a message there, or leave a comment below, or send me an email via my website, or whatever you would like to do. And maybe your story can be featured in the next video. As always, before we begin, I'd like to remind you to like this video and to subscribe to the channel if you find yourself back here on the regular and you enjoy seeing my face or listening to my low, monotone British accent. Then by all means, please subscribe. And if you're feeling extra saucy because it's the end of the year, you can leave me a donation on Ko-fi. I'd really like that. Of course I would. An agency hired me to work on a pharmaceutical project. I say agency because he seems to just win projects and then find people to do the work. Agency owner had no idea how to run the project at all, couldn't get straight answers from the client end, didn't know the right questions to ask. Consequently, took us 5 times longer than it should have done to nail the first part of the project. He expected me to be available to make changes and attend meetings at the drop of a hat. I ended up being a mug and staying up late and shifting things around to accommodate. Then when the client made noises about wanting someone with regulatory compliance writing experience for the second part of the project, he dropped me with no notice, less than 48 hours after telling me that he wanted me to take control of the entire second stage. Used the bullshit excuse, "You can step down now." I wanted out anyway, so I didn't make a big deal, but then he asked my opinion on something 24 hours later. Needless to say, I didn't reply. This is a really interesting one because it touches on a lot of things that I personally grapple with as a freelancer. So there is a discourse in the community about the fact that it is your job to make the client's life easier. You need to be available like that. You need to be accommodating. You need to be the one who is the most knowledgeable, and you need to, basically your primary function is to be there to serve the client, to make their life easier, right? Kind of goes without saying, but my issue is, where does that end? Because I have a roster of retained clients. I want to give them all amazing service. I want to make all of their lives easier. But if you have one particular client who doesn't understand boundaries, they begin to encroach on the work that you do and the service that you provide for all other clients. When they're coming in wanting you to pick up the phone, they're disrupting your work that you're trying to do for someone else. They are impacting the promises that you've made with regards to turnarounds and availability for other clients. So expecting anyone to be available at the drop of the hat, it's just not cricket, is it? So in this case, this agency owner sounds like a right fuck about. And also, the point about being dropped really quickly. This is one of the issues with working with agencies, because on the one hand, they have a use for freelance talent. They like to be able to bring people in to help facilitate projects. When you work with agencies, you get that really great experience with really good brands. And when you find a good agency, you're really onto a winner. But in my experience, probably over half of the agencies that I've worked with in my time will promise the end client the fucking moon on a stick, and they have absolutely no idea how they're going to deliver that. It's not their problem. They just hand it to you and it's your problem. And if the client kicks off because it wasn't what they wanted, in order to appease that client, they're going to get rid of you. And they're not going to think twice about it. And I've heard this story quite a few times where people just get dropped like a sack of shit in order to make the client happy. Which feels kind of extreme, but I mean, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles in an agency. I mean, what a horrible situation. I think you did the right thing. Get out of there. Cut all ties. I think that the important thing to take from this story is that the person was like, oh no, no more, that's it. I'm not going to get into bed with you again. So good for you. I think that it is incredibly difficult for project managers and agency owners to manage the relationship between freelancers and creatives and the end client. I can imagine that it's a fucking nightmare. I wouldn't do it for all the tea in China. So, yeah, fuck that. Fuck that right off. In times like these, I always remember the about page that became a brochure in the second round of amends, only to become an about page again when the project finished. I mean, this is a classic example of scope creep, isn't it? Or the client finding inspiration when you've showed them something. They're like, oh yes, this is great. Let's do something else with this, which is amazing that your writing kind of inspires them to want to do more. But at the same time, if you're in this situation, you're probably going to want to turn around and say, love it. Great idea. However, that's completely outside the scope of what I was hired to do. Here is a new price for a brochure. Would you still like to go ahead? Okay, let's do the brochure. Having it go back to an about page again when the project finished, it's a bit much, isn't it? That's indicative of a person who doesn't really know what they want. So, I mean, I think that's one of those classic examples of a time when you're in a client relationship and the whole thing's a fucking roller coaster of unexpected shit. And in the end, you just have to be like, oh well, that's freelance life. Okay, this is a long one. Settle in. Hope you're ready. I was working with an agency I admired and was giddy to have signed a 6-month retainer after completing a successful project. In essence, rescuing them from a pinch. We even expressed mutual excitement about continuing our relationship after the initial 6 months. Oh, honey, I already know it's going to go badly wrong. Never confess your love that quickly. Well, all was humming along. The project was fun, abundant and collaborative, and my contributions were routinely celebrated, appreciated and respected. Bet you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, it's landing hard behind you, so take cover. The main big client I dealt with, on behalf of the agency, was difficult, with multiple forums using the word toxic and narcissistic to describe the owner in the past and present tense. Not a good look, but thankfully I was working with the agency directly. Furthermore, the agency had signed me under the guise of being a kind and considerate place to work. I leaned on how the agency wanted me to write. Breezy, descriptive copy versus the longer form the client preferred and the agency gawked at. The agency assured me that I had grasped the brand tone perfectly and was doing a solid job for this client and many others. The kicker? After having a positive performance review on a Friday with action points to follow going forward, I was let go the following Monday via email. I was blindsided, to say the least. The email was flippant and cited that the main big client was having trouble with its sales and that all work had suddenly dried up, as in overnight. Okay. I felt this email was sent in haste without any regard for my strong work ethic or myself as a person. Since I was the freelancer on the project, I was the scapegoat, and yet not everything rested on the copy. Moreover, a brief phone call would have gone a long way. I would have been more than accommodating to take some time off before work started up again. Nothing seemed right with any of this, and I dare say this is not how you treat people. I felt dismissed and sensed they were lying to me. I was right, because they immediately onboarded 2 new clients that must have been in the pipeline. Funny enough, I came across a review of the agency on a public forum where they were called greedy, and I can't say I disagree. I also witnessed other things that were quite disparaging, but I suppose I'll keep them to myself until we can meet up in a pub one day. Oh, and they completely disregarded the 2-week clause in my contract I set as a buffer should a client and I need to part ways. Their actions left me with such a sour taste in my mouth that I didn't enforce it because I wanted out of there. P.S. I turned down a content opportunity to work with a celebrity designer because I wouldn't have had time. I wanted to honour my current commitment to the agency, and so I tried to push the start date and couldn't get them back. It is what it is, lesson learned. How would you have handled things? Would you have done the same? I mean, how would I have handled things? Babe, it doesn't sound like you were even given anything to handle. Do you know what I mean? You were being told that you were great and you were doing an amazing job, and then you were instantly fired. Just out of the blue. I think this is a perfect example of what I've literally just said at the beginning of this video, that like freelancers do become the scapegoat because we are disposable workers. We're brought in when you're in trouble and you need someone to help you now, which is part of the, benefit of freelance talent. And when shit goes wrong, you axe that bitch and move on. And I guess that some employers probably assume that there's not going to be any repercussions. You're not an employee that can go on Glassdoor and leave like a shitty little review. But what they don't realise is that we all talk. Oh yes, we talk. We know all of the shitty employers. We share information. We're a network that supports one another. So just bear that in mind. And here's another thing, right? This is getting me actually a little bit fired up. If you have to say that you're a kind and supportive work environment, are you though? If you have to say it, oh dearie dear. Also, how many of us go and check employee reviews on websites before onboarding a client? Hardly any. Hardly any of us do that. This video is starting to become a video that makes agencies look really not cute. But I mean, what can I say? It's not my fault. I'm just reading what they've done. A big fancy London agency approached me about doing tone of voice and messaging for a client. When I started working with the client, it was clear they had been mis-upsold my services. Didn't get it, didn't want it, wanted something else instead. I then got stuck in the middle of this weird situation where the agency was pushing my services and the client was pushing back. I was happy to just duck out with the 50% deposit paid, but the agency was determined to get some work for their money. I'd quoted high. It ended up being quite stressful as they were putting pressure on me, so I came down with COVID. I was fine but probably unprofessional, but I needed a way to hit pause. When I resurfaced 10 days later, they thankfully agreed to cut their losses and move on. The shittest bit was their "you need to do something for the 50% deposit" attitude. It was their problem they'd signed a contract and booked me to work with a client who didn't want what I do. I'm sure for a big markup their side. Anyway, never ever working with them again. Is this going to be another situation where the account manager is promising the moon on a stick and not actually thinking about how they're going to deliver that? Or is this a situation where they've got a target to hit, so they're upselling everything they possibly can without actually listening to what the client has asked for? The difficulty is with being a freelancer is that you yourself are business development, project manager, writer, agency owner as one individual. So you're used to your own working practices and processes. So you know what you need in order to start the job properly. You know what you have promised to a client. You know what's within your ability to deliver, and you've had that conversation one-on-one with the client and have a full understanding of what they're after, right? So when you switch to working with an agency, you become part of the creative team. So you're not necessarily always involved in those initial discussions about what the client wants and what the project is and what's going to be delivered. You're just handed a brief, and you have to trust that that brief is accurate and that the work you're doing is what's been asked for and, you know, what they want. But you don't know because you weren't fucking there, right? So you have to really trust that account manager or agency owner that they have done their job properly at the beginning of the project. This really is coming off as quite a bad video for agencies. And I have to say, like, there are 2 agencies that I work with and have been working with since the start of my freelance career. Both of them I cold pitched, and they are both the fucking nicest clients. Like, so nice. They look out for me, they look after me, they make sure I have everything that I need, they answer my questions, they make sure that the client is giving them everything they need to pass on to me, they allow me to lead in client meetings and feedback sessions. So that's my post lady. And they are there to support me and back me up. And then if there's anything that I've provided in the draft that they're not sure on, they'll query it and give me the space to come back and say, well, actually, no, they said blah, 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 blah. So that's why I did this. And then they're happy to take my side and they'll pass the draft on. So I have some really, really great relationships with agencies. But yeah, there's nice agencies out there. It's just, unfortunately, the nature of the relationship that you have with them as a freelancer makes it quite difficult. When I was at the start of my freelancing life, I had an absolute horror. Yummy Cheshire mummy with a kids cafe wanted to franchise. Had done some work at an RHOC party. What's that? RHOC party. Real Housewife. What is it? No. Is it Real Housewives of Orange County? Is it? If you're the original poster who sent me this query, let me know if this is what that is. Because if that's true, I'm obsessed. Is it though? I really want it to be. Had done some work at a Real Housewives of Orange County party and thought she was the dog's doodahs. Not being funny, if I'd done work at a Real Housewives party, I would be up my own arse as well. She was hard work, but happy with what I was doing until she decided she was paying too much. i.e. she couldn't afford her bill, expected me to be the one to fix the contract and accommodate her. When I said she owed me money, she got really nasty, cancelled the work, refused to pay the month she owed, then got a business mentor involved to act as a bullshit intermediary. He just insulted marketing and social media, what I was doing for her. Then when I still pushed for payment, she threatened legal action as her husband was a barrister. Honestly, I nearly jacked in freelancing. I was so anxious and fearful of my emails, I was physically sick. I ended up walking away. Horrid, horrid woman. What the fuck? Okay, well now I don't care that she's affiliated with the Real Housewives. You know what? This is another perfect example of get that 50% deposit up front before you start any work so you can make sure that they're good for the money. Because, yeah, you would think looking at this, oh, she's a business owner, she's, you know, like low-key famous, of course she's good for the money. No, no, no. I've worked for very big global clients who, funnily enough, were not good for the money, okay? So you can't size is not an indicator of whether or not someone's going to pay their freelance invoices, you know? How horrible to threaten legal action, but good for you for going after that money. Fucking good for you. I very rarely would encourage someone to walk away from getting the money that they're fucking owed. You get that money. You did the job. You did the work. You fucking get that money. Unless, you know, someone starts threatening legal action and you're becoming physically sick, in which case it's not worth it to you. Sometimes I think it's better to ask yourself, like, would I pay that amount of money to be rid of this person from my life? And if the answer is yes, fucking walk away. But I would usually encourage you to at least try and get the money. Don't just kind of sneak away and be shy. Holy shit. I mean, wow. We've had a time of it here today, haven't we, folks? Lucky for you, I've got a whole other folder full of stories ready to go for the new year. So if you enjoy trauma and trauma bonding with me and your fellow freelancers, well then, oh my God, subscribe and wait for the next video, because I can guarantee it will be just as traumatizing as this one was. Leave a comment below. What was your favorite trauma horror story? My favorite one was the about page that became a brochure that went back to an about page again, because that level of fuckery is just so freelancer. Okay, well, thanks very much for watching. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you don't, I will know. And join me back here again in the new year when we will be getting into more freelance stuff. You will give me your Qs, I'll give you my As. I'll probably do a couple of Filofax videos in the mix as well. Because why the fuck not? Treat yourself. And yeah, have a great holiday season and new year. And I'll see you back here very, very soon. Take care and peace out.